Billy Duff grabbed his snap box, glanced at his watch and jumped onto his bike. As usual, he wasn't early, he wasn't late, he was simply on time. He went down the hill left at the junction and signalled right. Good. The lights were on green. Billy stared at the lights as if daring them to change red, but they didn't. They wouldn't dare. Not until he'd passed. Directly ahead of Billy was a railway station, and that was where he worked. Billy put his cycle into the driver's bike rack in its usual slot and walked into the station at his usual slow but regular pace. The railway station was an enormous building. It was bigger than a church, bigger than a cathedral, and the noises echoed from loudspeakers, grumbled and hissed from railway engines, and shrieked from the station master's whistle. The sound of Billy's unhurried walk added to the steady rhythm. He was a key part of this place. Kath worked at the newsstand. She knew Billy would be arriving any minute. In fact, not just any minute, he would arrive at exactly 5:02. So at 6 minutes to, she held out a hand with a rolled up newspaper in it. As if by magic, Billy reached out and took it. Billy, of course, had the correct money for the newspaper and handed it to Kath as he went by. "Morning, young Kath," he said. "Morning, Billy." Kath smiled. It was business as usual. Billy's engine was waiting for him on platform 3. He was driving it to London St Pancras. Platform 3 was the furthest platform from the station entrance, but Billy was in no rush. He never ever rushed because he was always on time. Platform 3 was emptying of passengers who were quickly boarding the train that Billy would take to London. He knew that 1 or 2 passengers might get in his way, maybe slow down his progress, but he was an expert and deftly dodged the passengers and the suitcases. Billy opened the engine door and jumped into the cab. He settled into the driver's seat just as the station master blew his whistle. Billy pulled out of the station. As usual, he wasn't early, he wasn't late, he was simply on time. You might think that Billy was really a train driver, not an engine driver, but if you'd been foolish enough to suggest that to Billy, you would have regretted it. In his most serious voice, he would say, "You can't drive a train, no. An engine pulls a train. Without the engine, the train doesn't go anywhere." Billy was very definitely an engine driver, a very punctual engine driver. Billy's train was due to arrive at St Pancras station at 12:15. Having made several stops along the way, picking up and dropping off passengers, it stopped smoothly at the correct platform just as the grand station clock clicked its way to 12:15. Billy was on time. He had precisely 1 hour and 23 minutes for his lunch break. He liked to catch a London red bus, sit on the top deck and visit one of the many sights in London. Today he found his way to Buckingham Palace, where he was hoping to see the Queen. He thought she might be waving from a balcony, or walking a corgi on the forecourt, or riding one of the horse-drawn carriages, but as it happened, she wasn't. Billy didn't mind. There'd be other days. He'd try again next time he drove to London. And so he made his way back to St Pancras and walked onto the train, and pulled off on time. The journey back was perplexing. Billy couldn't understand why he was held up at signals where normally he wasn't, or delayed at stations where normally he wasn't. And there were leaves on the line. To his horror, he found himself running late. This would never do. Billy was never late. Even the sound of the word made him shudder. He said the letters, L-A-T-E. It sounded wrong, or even a curse. No, he thought, I will be on time, as I always am. Nothing for it. I'll have to put this right. He pushed and coaxed the engine as hard as he dare. The leaves left a line, the signals suddenly behaved, and fewer passengers got on and off, and so gradually he made the time up. This was lucky because as he pulled on to Derby Station, he could see his boss, Joe, the foreman, standing on the platform, and he was looking at his watch. This was his usual position, eyebrows raised, ready to frown or rest accordingly. He was never seen to smile. As soon as Billy stopped the engine, he jumped down onto the platform and walked, not rushing, he never rushed, over to where Joe the foreman was waiting for him. Joe's eyebrows rested in a suitably pleased position, and he shook hands with Billy. "Well, you're on time again." Billy nodded his head thoughtfully. But of course he was. "I've got an important job coming up, Billy," continued Joe, "and I want a top driver to do it." Billy nodded again, but remained silent. Joe continued, "For the rest of the week, I'm going to have an inspector ride with you to see if you're the driver to do this job for me." Once again, Billy nodded, but this time he said, "Well, you can rely on me, Joe, but aren't you going to tell me what this job is?" "Sorry, Billy, I've been sworn to secrecy, but I can promise you that if you impress the inspector, I'll let you into the secret on Monday when you start your shift." And then he winked. He never winked. Billy knew this must be a very important job. The next morning, having parked his bike in the usual place and picked up his paper from Kath's newsstand, Billy jumped into his engine cab at precisely the right time. As promised by Joe, the inspector was waiting. He sat quietly in the spare seat and didn't answer even when Billy said, "Morning." He just unwrapped a rubber band from a little black book and proceeded to write in it. Every time Billy did anything, even smooth his quiff or blow his nose, the inspector scribbled a note in his little black book. Billy didn't mind. He was always on time whether the inspector was there or not. He knew his job. He knew how to pull away from a station steadily so the carriages he was pulling didn't judder and jangle and cause a ripple of spillages down the length of the train. He knew how to slow down in good time when he was coming to a station or obey a signal so the carriages didn't bang into one another, and how to take a corner smoothly. But the inspector said nothing. He just made notes in his little black book with his scratchy pen. Every morning that week, the inspector was waiting for Billy. Every morning, Billy drove as well as it was possible to drive. They went all over the country: Manchester, Liverpool, Bristol, Cardiff, Glasgow, London. By the end of the week, Billy had almost forgotten the inspector was sitting next to him, silently watching and writing. Only the sound of the scratchy pen reminded him he was there. And so it was on Friday, when they pulled into Derby Station, Billy got quite a start, where the inspector leaned forward and patted him on the shoulder. "Well done, Driver Duff," he said in a deep but monotone voice, and climbed down onto the platform. He put an elastic band around his little black book, placed it securely in his pocket, and walked off down the platform to Joe, the foreman's office. The following Monday morning was the only day Billy ever turned up early for work. He still parked his bike in the usual place and walked at his even, steady pace to the newsstand. Kath was surprised. She hastily reached for a paper. "You're early, Billy," she said. "Something important?" Billy picked up his paper. He looked a little perplexed. "I don't know, Kath," he said. "I might be early, but I have to go and see Joe, so I'm on time for that." "Good luck, Billy," she replied, and he paid her the exact money and walked off. It was unsettling to see him here this early. Billy knocked on the office door with 3 raps, all precise and evenly tapped. From inside, Joe shouted, "Come in, Billy, and take a seat." Billy took off his driver's cap and quickly combed his quiff by gazing into the permanent shine of his polished boots. He sat down and looked across the desk. Seemed an age before Joe spoke. "Well, Billy, I've been reading the inspector's report over the weekend, and he's confirmed what I've always really believed. You, Billy, are my top driver." Joe waited for Billy to say something, but Billy just sat there quietly. Billy was worried. Joe looked different. What's that strange look? A smile on his face? He folded his hands on his cap and waited. "I promise you that I would share the secret with you this morning if you impress the inspector. So I can tell you that the Queen is coming to Derby on an official visit, and we want you to have the honour of being driver to Her Majesty." Billy had always dreamt of being the Queen's driver. She had her own train, which only the royal family used, and only the top drivers were chosen to drive her. He started smiling. He didn't stop smiling when he told Kath the good news. He didn't stop smiling when he got into his cab. He didn't stop smiling when he polished the Queen's engine. It was a steady smile, neither too pinched or too broad. Just right as driver to Her Majesty the Queen should be. The Queen's visit had been set with only a short time beforehand, so preparations began quickly. It was no longer a secret. Derby Station was given a new coat of paint. Kath's newsstand had a bright new striped awning, her favourite colour, powder blue, to match a new suit she'd bought. And Driver Duff's engine was cleaned, stripped down, polished, ready for the journey to London and back with his very important passengers. This would be Billy's proudest moment. On the big day, Billy took the Queen's train to London, waited for the very important passengers to settle down in the train, on time of course, and he drove it as smoothly as he could back to Derby. If it hadn't been for the clickety-clack of the wheels as they went over the joints in the rails, the Queen wouldn't have known she was moving at all. There will be no stops on this journey, so Billy timed it to perfection, slowing down a little at every station so the Queen could wave to all the people who had come out to see her, and they could wave back. Derby Station soon came into view. A little too soon for Billy, because he'd enjoyed the journey so much he didn't want it to end just yet. But he was on time, and that's how it had to be. Billy had one last job to do for Her Majesty. He had to stop the train so that the Queen's door stopped exactly at the end of a red carpet, specially put down for her to walk on. It won't surprise you to find out that he stopped the train in exactly the right spot. Not 1 inch too far, not 1 inch too short. The train wasn't early, it wasn't late. It was on time. Exactly on time. The Queen stepped off the train directly onto the red carpet, followed by a line of corgis. Bill could see Kath curtsy as the Queen passed the newsstand. The Queen turned and waved graciously at Billy, and he smiled. Maybe a little too broadly, but after all this was Billy Duff's big day.